City Games Open Series weekend featuring the Invitational. Max Tietze has had a heck of a tournament here. My favorite moment so far this tournament, show and tell from an Omnitel opponent. Max Tietze, Angel of Despair from the sideboard, elbow dropping his opponent.
4-color mono goblin control from Max Tietze.
Max is the #2 seed in this tournament, so he had the choice.
Yes, and I don't believe there's a deck in Legacy, maybe Dredge, that doesn't want to go first. Brian Eason slipped into the top 8 at 8th position, so he's been actually he hasn't gone first for any of these games.
Yeah, he has had to upset every single one of his opponents. Always the underdog, but will the underdog Brian Eason be able to continue now that he's facing off against this experienced player? You can see both of the players reviewing each other's deck lists. We do this in every elimination rounds, pardon me, in every one of these top 8 matches, largely because we don't want somebody that maybe doesn't have access to a computer or a smartphone to be held back in the tournament because their opponent can get their list and they can't get their opponent's. So much like Grand Prix and Pro Tours in the top 8, these players are allowed to see the full deck list of their opponent. There are no more surprises to be had here from the deck lists.
So what's really important for Max is to get one of these turn 1 plays, either Aether Vial, Goblin Lackey. Those two are really crucial for the development of his game. As I've said many times this weekend, the key to Goblins is basically, it's some sort of mana advantage deck. Goblin Lackey, Aether Vial basically allow them to cheat their Goblins into play, and they have a specific mana base of 4 Rishadan Pause, 4 Wasteland, to basically act as mana suppression to slow down the opponent so they can't basically develop their deck. On the other hand, Brian Eason's deck, the key card is basically its namesake, Stoneforge Mystic. If he gets Stoneforge Mystic into play, he has 2 options. He can get Batterskull, a formidable threat there, as well as an Umezawa's Jitte. Umezawa's Jitte is particularly good in this matchup, able to suppress basically most of the goblins that Max's deck can produce.
If you're just joining us, I'm Adrian Sullivan in the booth with the one, the only, the Ben Sec.
Okay, looks like Max is having a look at his hand. It's either land light or does not have early action. That's usually the 2 options that people are coming down to. Like when you're playing with goblins, he goes back to the deck, doesn't like his first 7.
Now, Goblins is like many various different decks in Legacy that can very effectively recover from a mulligan. I think the one that is the most impressive to me in its ability to mulligan well might be Dredge. I don't think I've ever seen a deck other than Dredge mulligan to 2 and win, and I've seen that happen on camera. So, you know, Goblins, the way that a Goblins deck can very easily recover from a bad mulligan is, simply put, drawing 4 cards off of a Goblin Ringleader, and he can even do that if, let's say Max were to mulligan way down, a turn 1 Goblin Lackey, if it's unstopped, if it happens to get something like a Ringleader, you can be completely in the game after a terrible mulligan.
Yeah, and they have 2 ways to get their Ringleader. They have drawing the Ringleader itself, and they can also Goblin Matron. Goblin Matron's basically a demonic tutor on legs for goblins.
Up until the printing of Gristlebrand, I think I would have called Goblins the numero uno card advantage deck in Legacy. Gristlebrand might be changing that for a good time, if not the rest of history. And turn 1, no play from Max besides a land. Not the way he wants to start.
No, so Brian cracking his fetch land first turn. Going for a discard spell in the form of Thoughtseize. So as we were the cards we're talking about, the 2 Goblin Ringleaders and nothing but land. Really very slow hand from Max. This does not bode well. If Brian actually has a Stoneforge Mystic, Max is going to be really, really hard-pressed to come back from that.
Well, one of the things that Max can do here to buy some time, Max can go and lay a Rishadan Port on turn 2, follow that up with a Rishadan Port again on turn 4 to hold down Brian Eason's first 2 lands. If you're just joining us, I'm Adrian Sullivan here in the booth with Ben Seck, watching the final match of this incredible Legacy Standard Invitational weekend. We are now in the Open Series for Legacy.
So Max has drawn a pile driver. The problem with playing the pile driver is it really opens him up to the Mystic if he's worried about it coming down. If he plays a Rishadan Port and he just taps in the upkeep, which is what it looks like he's going to do, he doesn't have the ability to play the Stoneforge Mystic this turn. He actually didn't have a Stoneforge Mystic until that draw step though, but now he does. So as it turns out, it was a good choice by Max. Max plays a Cavern of Souls, most likely on Goblin. He plays a Goblin Lackey down there, but there's multiple, at least one Swords to Plowshares in Brian Eason's hands to basically suppress that card.
If it was not for that Swords to Plowshares, Max could easily recover from this moment.
Yeah, so I think what's going to happen here is very likely we're going to see a Sackland going for Tundra.
If you're having trouble hearing us, the background noise, you can hear a lot of stuff happening. We're going to try to see if we can get them to calm down in their attempt to clean up this room, but I apologize for the background noise. I know it's hard to actually to hear with all that happening.
So Brian's searching for that Tundra, going to Swords to Plash. Oh, he's not going to Swords to Plash as the Lackey.
Lays another land and fetches.
Going to play the Stoneforge Mystic.
This is likely to make the game almost impossible at this stage for Max to recover from. One of the problems, Max's answers to artifacts in the main deck, it is in the form of, let's see, it looks like
just Tin Street Hooligan.
One Tin Street Hooligan, which unfortunately won't be able to kill a Batterskull before it has end of turn gotten into play. The use of an Aether Vial will not give him the green mana that he would need to kick and kill a, it's not a kicker actually, but the mana to kill a Batterskull until it's already hit. Max casts Runch. Oh wow, look at that. 1, 2, 3 goblins off of that Goblin Ringleader.
Including a very important Gem Palm Incinerator. Basically that will allow him to kill the Stoneforge Mystic should he getting that creature off the board. Also giving him an option of actually, if he gets enough goblins on the table, killing the Batterskull.
Inquisition, let's check your hand, see what you got in there.
I'm pretty sure he's going to take the Gem Palm Incinerator now.
Got Aether Vial, Pile Driver, War Chief. Another Ringleader, but that can't be touched.
I think he wants to take the Incinerator here. Like, basically allows him to... There's not many creature removal spells in the deck. The Batterskull, he needs to protect the Batterskull as long as possible. And he takes the Incinerator.
Max Tietze is not giving up without a fight here.
Yeah, so there is 2 more Swords to Plowshares in Brian Eason's hand too, so he's really has most of this creature suppression down. I suspect there's going to be probably another Ringleader this turn. He really just needs to try and either get the Tin Street Hooligan or another Incinerator, and the best way to do that is to search for more goblins. You can generally find a Matron or something like that.
Max Tietze is looking to find a path out of this problem. Now, obviously, the ringleader can give him some extra cards, but what he's worried about is what's going to happen after that. And the ringleader hits the table. Brian, not too concerned yet, but who knows? A particularly good ringleader could cause a lot of worry.
Okay.
Not bad.
Not bad. Both 3-for-1s on that. The most important card being the matron there. The matron's going to allow him to search out probably the 10th Street Hooligan to crush that Batterskull. Also very important there is the the Skirk Prospector, which will actually give him the extra mana that will allow him to kind of go off here.
One funny thing, Cavern of Souls can be used to pay green to help contribute to a 10th Street Hooligan and affect a uncounterable destruction of an artifact.
Mm-hmm.
Get a Germ. Brian Eason now with a Batterskull and a Stoneforge Mystic. Remember, Max Tietze here on a mulligan and no 1-drop, no 2-drop. Finally comes into play with a 3-drop Lackey and then a port on Brian Eason. He had a pretty slow start for Goblins. He's trying to put up a good fight, though.
Yeah, it actually looks like Max. It's almost brought the game back to equilibrium now. Like I would say.
You see the first, and Brian Eason, he is no stranger to the problem of a Skirk Prospector.
Yeah,
that's a smart play.
Yeah, I'm really of the opinion. I think he shouldn't have played it that turn. He really left himself open to that kind of thing. He needed that Skirk Prospector to be able to like really abuse Goblin Matron, get enough mana so he could actually cast 10th Street earlier.
One of the things to remember is that while there is a lot of value in playing your mana efficiently, mana efficiency is not the only game in town in Magic. I'm not sure whether or not the Skirk Prospector there was correct or not, but it's a complicated game that we play this Magic the Gathering, so you know, I'll leave it up to the Goblin experts out there. Jim Davis, are you watching? What do you think? Also at home, if you've got a strong opinion, are you a Goblins player? Hashtag SCGEnvy, at SCG Live. Let us know what you think. What should have happened there? I know I've only played Goblins probably maybe less than 10 or 20 times in my life. So,
so it looks like he's going to play the War Chief. Almost certainly going to be followed by a Matron. He basically has to make sure he rations his threats out, making sure that he's going to cast a Skirk War Marshal, Mog War Marshal. Not exactly sure what his plan with that War Marshal is, because I mean, yes, he can block the Batterskull. It's obviously likely what's going to happen. Anyway, so I was talking. He needs to ration his threats out with the Caverns, because Brian Eason does have Forces of Will, and in fact does have one right now in his hand, and so he doesn't want to just like waste one of his goblins to get Force of Will when he has perfectly good Caverns in hand. Brian Eason actually has counterspells as well, and he has that one counterspell in his main deck in his hand.
Spell Pierce.
Yeah, that is the only card in Max's deck that can be Spell Pierce. I mean, it's probably not as useful on turn 1,000,000, which it is now, but it's still better for Brian to have gotten some value out of that the Spell Pierce. Okay, so Brainstorm looks like he's hiding something. He's going to attack, block with the War Marshal so he doesn't have to pay Echo. Gets another 1/1. interesting that he has the Umezawa's Jitte and Counterspell in hand, yet chooses not to cast it or equip it.
Umezawa's Jitte is a card that once it actually manages to connect onto, doing damage, Brian Eason can then start mowing down the entire force that Max Tietze here has been using. When I have called in the past Goblins a mid-range aggro deck, what I mean by that is it explodes onto the board, but it wins on the board. So if you're able to tear up its board, that's the kind of thing that a deck like this is not able to do. Now, just because it's fast, that doesn't mean it has a different strategic archetype.
Yeah, so Brian actually has kept a counterspell in hand. It's kind of tough. He knows the deck. The only things he can counterspell, as long as Max is really, really careful, are Aether Vials. So I think the Brainstorm, keeping in his hand, I guess he's hoping that Max screws up, doesn't tap a Cavern for a particular Goblin. But the counterspell is not going to be able to counter anything in the deck.
And we see red and 2 here from Max Tietze using a Cavern of Souls. I believe we're going to see a Matron. Here it comes.
Yep.
And Max Tietze can now effectively take any one of his useful spells out of his deck and then put it in his hand. The only, as was being said by Ben earlier, the only non-goblins in his main deck are mana. Aether Vial, which is a kind of fake mana, and the rest of his lands, which are for reals mana.
So it's likely he's going to get a 10th Street Hooligan. As someone on the Twitterverse let us know, you can actually spend a green on the Cavern to... Oh.
No, he's going for the Incinerator. Yeah, I mentioned the green on the Cavern a few minutes ago, and then a couple other people have also talked about that online. Thank you on Twitter for backing me up on that. The Gem Palm Incinerator is a really interesting choice. This is basically, I think, to make it so that Brian is not going to want to leave himself... Well, how to put this? It's going to make it so that Max can protect himself from the first creature that has a Jitte on it. Brian Eason is able to put that Jitte into play at the end of turn, and so right now Max just wants to protect, I think, from that first hit.
Mm-hmm.
Dangerous to consider putting down another goblin. He's still toying with it.
Yeah, he doesn't actually know that the Jitte is in his hand.
Oh, okay. Well,
so this is we're working with perfect information here. We know what's in Brian's hand.
Max has got to think, what if the Jitte comes down? That could spell real trouble.
Yeah, like it's. I think he really needs to be careful. Yes, Max kind of like.
Yeah.
Works out that he needs not to...
Aaron Forsyth online brings up a really, really classic point. If there's a War Chief in play, which currently there's not, it's impossible for a 10th Street Hooligan to kill an artifact. This has actually come up on coverage before, where Owen Turtenwald was not able to kill an artifact at Grand Prix Columbus many years ago because he had a Goblin War Chief in play.
Okay, so Max is actually going to kill the Stoneforge Mystic. Basically kind of forcing Brian's hand to play the Jitte. There's so much card advantage in Tietze's deck. He can really afford to kind of like throw a lot of goblins away at the Batterskull.
Brainstorm in response.
No counterspelling. I think that counterspell's really had its day in his hand. Not really doing a ton.
Brian Eason has no access to a card like Stifle, so right now he's just trying to figure out what his best option is. That Brainstorm is for information for the most part.
Yeah, that's absolutely. And he put away both his counterspells. He knows that they're basically useless in this situation.
He does not activate his Stoneforge Mystic.
I think he wants to kind of sandbag that a little bit. He wants to make it a little bit of a surprise. If he vials it out now, he's basically forced to use it.
you're just joining us, this is the final match. It's game 1 of Goblins versus Stoneblade, and we've watched a lot of Magic this weekend. 52 rounds of Magic before this moment have passed in the major events this weekend. Max Tietze on the left here, looking at trying to take it down with a Goblins deck that looks like it could have been made in 2007 or 8. Now, he's got a couple updates. The Cavern of Souls is the most important one, I would say.
You can tell by the fact that all the borders are the old school borders, they're not the new ones. You see that Max actually blocked with 6 power worth of creatures. He basically didn't want to get blown out by a Swords to Plowshares, which actually happens to be in Brian's hand. Like, he's now forcing... the key thing about this is by killing the Stoneforge Mystic, he forces the Battle Skull to be cast main phase, and really puts a little bit more pressure on Brian's mana, and eventually he'll be able to actually draw the Tin Streets Hooligan to kill the Battle Skull.
Now, if we look at this this board state, Brian Eason with that Swords to Plowshares has some defense going on. Max Tietze, though, his hand is really full. This is from the benefit of the ringleaders he's had going on, and his hand still full of gas.
It's good to see that the director of Magic, Aaron Forsyth, is also watching our stream.
Big shout out to Aaron Forsyth, long-time Magic, I guess you could say, guide. He's been keeping Magic on track, I think, in such a great way for a long time. And look at this. We've got a Goblin Warchief in play. This means that every single Goblin that Max Tietze plays will be able to have haste. Of course, Brian Eason can try to put a monkey in the wrench of that by Swords to Plowshares on that Warchief.
Yep. He's either going to hit that Warchief or he's going to hit the Pile Driver. The Warchief is obviously the immediate problem because it would stop the Pile Driver as well. The problem with that is the Pile Driver is still there. It still represents a lot of damage. If Max actually has a way of dealing with the Germ or the Battle Skull itself, he's going to be in a little bit of deeper trouble. So Brian's kind of put at a choice, and he's decided to go
I like that play.
Yeah, I think so too. I think the haste is going to put more pressure on him over the course of the turns.
If you remember in the quarterfinals, Max Tietze had out the Warchief, and on the back of that Warchief was able to suddenly manufacture a kill that looked like it wouldn't have been possible the turn before. That's the real danger of Warchief, is just massive increase of the threats that weren't even something that were in the mind of the opponent the turn before.
Wow, the lackey brings out a Siege Gang. This is
an Aether Vial for good measure.
I think the Aether Vial's probably come a little late, but...
Well, I mean, it can still have an impact on the game 4 turns down the line. I mean, Brian Eason, he has a lot of stuff that he can do yet, and the Aether Vial is just yet another way for Max Tietze to, later on, should Brian Eason, recover from this position, which he fully can do. It's another way for him to push through against, surprises. End of turn, put out a Goblin you didn't expect and maybe kill you. Yeah,
so he's going to return the Battle Skull to his hand right now. I think he might be regretting not playing the Jitte out in response to the Incinerator. It's still stranded in his hand. He's having trouble, basically, being able to cast it and equip it. He really needed that ability this turn.
Wow. So if you remember, this was a game that looked like Max was in trouble, but now look at the board. He is representing, with all of those Goblins, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 21, 24 damage, plus the sacrifice effects from Siege Gang Commander.
Yeah, it's like pretty much he could just run into the Pile Driver with the Battle Skull, and he's still probably going to be close to dead. And he definitely dies the next turn.
Well, and the other part about it, too, Siege Gang Commander means that Pile Driver, or whatever other creature that Brian Eason might block with a Battle Skull, just gets sacrificed to the Siege Gang Commander, not letting Brian Eason gain the 4 life from the skull.
One of the interesting cards he drew with the Brainstorm he just cast was a Snapcaster Mage. He can flashback the Source to Plowshares, which he probably has to do this main phase right now, because if he doesn't, then Siege Gang Commander becomes live. One of the issues, obviously, with plowing the Siege Gang right now is that Pile Driver is actually protection from blue.
I do see with a Snapcaster Mage, this is one of 4 Snapcaster Mages. Brian Eason can Swords the Siege Gang Commander and then Snapcaster to Swords again.
So it looks tough for him here. I think he basically has to choose to Source to Plowshares either the Pile Driver or the Siege Gang. Both are put him in pretty tough positions, because at the moment in his hand is a Jitte, a Batterskull, and a Snapcaster Mage. I would say Snapcaster Mage maybe it's really vying for with Dark Confidant as the best invitational card of all time.
That's probably close to fair. My apologies to Chris Pakula.
I'm afraid the meddling. I saw some meddling mages this weekend. They're not completely out.
Oh, they're not gone. It's just, I think Meddling Mage might have been the first truly incredible Planeswalker.
No,
I
sure.
do still love Avalanche Riders from its day, and I think right here we're going to see the end of the game. We're going to see. Oh wait. He's spending red mana with a mountain.
Yeah, he
What's
doesn't
he
actually
doing?
have. He doesn't have 2 red to kill the germ.
Okay, there we go. What I was thinking he was going to do is he was going to go like this with the Matron, and then go get a Incinerator and win.
Yes, I believe that's exactly what's going to happen here. The Pile Driver is going to be 1,000,000 power. Oh,
Tinsley Hooligan. That's actually better than an Incinerator. Either way, both plays are the win. Look at that, Max Tietze. Well, I would say showing his skill with goblins. He's played this deck a lot. One of my problems as a player has always been tunnel vision, and so I saw the Incinerator play, which is not as good. But I was like, oh, there's a play. I'll go with it.
Granted, both would win, so I don't think it really make that much difference. But the edges always matter.
The edges matter, especially over time. If you're just joining us, I'm Adrian Sullivan.
I'm Ben Sek.
We are here at the Star City Games Live, the incredible coverage. Right now we're in the Open Series. It's been the invitational weekend. We've had a whole ton of Magic. This is the 53rd round. We just saw Max Tietze win the first game, but there's more winners out there because you can win a free year of Star City Games Premium.
Wow, free year, that's a long time. It's worth a bunch, actually, if you have to pay for it, but you have a chance of getting it free.
Yeah.
All you have to do is answer a trivia question.
That's right. Now, in addition to answering that trivia question, we have to know you got the right answer. This isn't like being at home watching Jeopardy shouting answers at the screen. No, you've got to tweet to us. Use the hashtag SCGPremium for this trivia question. And if you are one of the people with the correct answer and that hashtag, one person at random will be selected, and they will become a winner of 1 year of free premium. So my question for you is very simple. This has been something that's been talked about a couple of different times. How many Grand Prix top 8s does Max Tietze, our finalist, have?
Oh, hold on, I can't answer. Can I?
Oh, you actually buzzed in too soon. We're going to have you at home answer. How many Grand Prix top 8s does Max Tietze have? Now, I'm going to give you a little hint. You can actually use the Star City Games deck database and look this kind of stuff up if you know how to use it. Otherwise, Google might be your friend. Put your answer, hashtag SCGPremium, and by the time this match is over, you could have won 1 free year of Star City Games Premium. Let's go to the sideboard. What do we got here?
Okay, so Max, he has access to 2 Croson Grips, almost definitely coming in. He needs a few more answers against the pretty much the crucial cards in Brian's deck are equipment, so he needs that answer. He has Pyrokinesis. I don't think he's going to bring those in. I don't think it really has enough creatures for it to work. Red Elemental Blast is an option, though he doesn't really need to force through any creatures. I mean, the caverns do a lot of work for him, so I'd hazard to say that it wouldn't make a lot of sense to bring in the red elemental last. Kind of gums up his deck a little bit too much. Other than that, I think really only the Crossman Grips. I mean, he has like Angel's Despair. Certainly not a show and tell matchup. Grafdigger's Cage and Relic of Progenitus, which happens to be really good in the last matchup, not really that important here.
I like your choice on the Croson Grips. Brian Eason on the other side, we talked about the best invitational cards. Look right there, it's Chris Bakula himself, Meddling Mage. Now, I don't believe that Chris Bakula belongs in a fight against goblins, but it's cool to see that he's showing up here in the finals.
If not on the sideboard, I don't think he's coming in, so...
I hope that he does not bring him in. Brian Eason here, you saw how many cards that Max Tietze had on the table there. There were so many goblins, in fact, that I think that Max was able to, should Brian have been at a higher life total, I think he would have been able to do something like 26 damage plus his activations of Siege Gang Commander. I don't remember if he had any mana open. Now, meanwhile, look at this. More sweep in the board for Brian Eason. So the sweep from Terminus. Terminus is a basically miracle version of Hallowed Burial. What's Hallowed Burial, you ask? It's like the card Day of Judgment, but it puts all of the cards, the creatures killed, on the bottom of your opponent's library. Now, this is exactly the kind of card that Brian Eason is going to want to have. And his deck is not in the main deck set up to fight against Max Tietze. Only one Terminus main, but in his sideboard, more Terminus, which he's definitely going to make great use of.
Yeah, he probably is going to bring in the Vindicate as well. I think he doesn't really want to lean on his counter magic very much at all. The counter magic, it's okay to keep in some. I think he probably needs to keep in maybe some of the Force of Wills.
Yeah.
Just as an option to keeping the Aether Vial off the table. But I think in general he wants to remove a lot of his counter magic, especially Spell Snare, not very good, and bring in as many cards as that are relevant.
Yeah, I think that the only counter spell he should have after sideboard is Force of Will, and even then, I'm not sure how many he should have. Once again, Goblins players, sorry, not Goblins players, let's talk to our various Stoneblade players out there. Do you have an opinion on Force of Will versus Goblins? I am not certain about this one. I could easily see on the play, just using your discard spell since you're an Esper build. But on the draw, I could see running all four. I think it might depend on if you're the player or the draw. I'm not sure, though. I would love to hear from our Esper Stoneblade players out there if you have an opinion about the Force of Will and its role in the sideboarding for Brian Eason.
Do you think he brings in Lingering Souls?
Lingering Souls is really interesting. I mean, it's basically is, in a way, kind of a speed bump. But, you know, there's nothing wrong with a speed bump if someone's rushing at you really fast.
Yeah,
they might just trip over it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think he really wants a couple more threats in his deck. At the end of the game, he really didn't hit Max very hard, so he didn't really present any sort of threats that were going to get through. I think Lingering Souls is very important. One, actually mostly because it actually it flies, so it gives him an option in the air.
Now we've talked about throughout this weekend that Max Tietze has some Grand Prix top 8s. Brian Eason here, he's the 8th seed to Max Tietze's number 2 seed. In many ways, he's the underdog, but can he come back and push up against Max Tietze, I think, what appears to be, you know, a greater pedigree and a resume within Magic, and show everybody that he's got what it takes to win this Legacy tournament?
Okay. Casting an Inquisition of Kozilek, seeing a pile driver, a lackey, a Aether Vial, a ringleader, and 3 land, all colorless. This would really make me take the Aether Vial here. I think he can't cast his lackey. You can cast it with his cavern, but I think killing the Aether Vial here is actually pretty important, especially if he has a Swords to Plowshares in hand, which he doesn't seem to, but he might have access to it after he's got the Brainstorms in his hand.
Max Tietze had a slightly disappointing run in the Invitational this weekend. 110 players from that event made the day 2 of the Invitational. He was number 113.
Well, It's all right. I mean, Max Tietze has had significant success at the Invitational. He actually won the first one of the year in Baltimore, so he's no stranger to the finals tables. I would expect a turn one. Oh, he's just wastelanding it. He's kind of hoping for a slightly mana light draw from Brian. Kind of going for the wasteland win he actually received in the semifinals. It's looks like a Psyduck brainstorm for those Pokemon fans out there. Psy-ai-ai.
That's funny. Oh boy, now you see the Goblin Lackey in play, and I'm curious if you know who did that alteration. I feel like I've seen that exact specific brainstorm.
It's possible that Psyduck's not on the brainstorm. He's actually just working somewhere, sending these this mental image to me.
If you're just joining us, I'm Adrian Sullivan here with Ben Seck, and we're watching Game 2 of the finals of the Legacy Open here.
Okay, so he
fetching here with the polluted Delta.
I think that Brian kept. He actually had another brainstorm in his hand, and he had Terminus on top of his deck. I think he took the Terminus because he has another brainstorm. He kind of wants Max to overcommit a little more on his Lackey. So Brian just kind of setting him up. I think just trying to bait him into, like, putting a little more creatures on the table. Obviously, the general problem with that is he is. Oh wow, he did bring in the middling mages.
That's interesting. I mean, one of the things about it on the play, the meddling mage doesn't stop a Lackey from getting things done. It doesn't stop a Aether Vial from putting a creature into play. But it is actually a speed bump that he can use to, say, do things like...
well, he can block a Lackey here. The Lackey itself can't attack.
Absolutely.
So I think Chris Bakula has, I wouldn't say rolled over in his grave, he's still alive, but the fact that it's not the image of himself would probably cause him great pain. Pile Driver actually has protection from blue, so actually can run past the Meddling Mage. The Meddling Mage is naming Ringleader, which is obviously extremely useful. So basically, Brian has set himself up such that Max really can't develop the board until he gets the Meddling Mage off the table. And that is something that he does not actually have that many tools to do so. He basically only has 4 incinerators. Granted, he can get those incinerators from by way of Matron, but like something tells me that all that Brian Eason really needs is just a little bit of time.
Max Tietze is with a 3rd mana here. A Mountain, a Cavern of Souls, a Rishadan Port. And right now, he needs to work out a way to make sure that too much time doesn't pass by before Brian Eason has established enough either manipulation of his library or other control elements to have wrapped up the game. Max comes on with both creatures, marching them directly at the Meddling Mage. That's actually a really surprising play. The Pile Driver becomes a 3/2. The Lackey is a 1/1 still. And the kind of question I'm asking myself is, what does Max Tietze have in mind? This player has been playing great Magic all day. He is not doing this by accident. So what's his plan?
I think his plan. I think he's kind of given up on the Lackey. That's my guess. It really, There's no good. As far as I can see in his, unless he has. No, I was trying to think of a few different options.
I mean, there is the possibility of.
There's no.
Yeah, I guess I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, I think he's just. I mean, even if he has. Oh, he did have the incinerator. He's just going to do it just in case.
Yeah. He put the attack in first, so that the ringleader would definitely get the bonus, and now the incinerator is cycled to get rid of Chris Bakula. Now, interestingly, there, if you look, you can see that Chris Bakula has had a makeover. Or wait, maybe something else is up. For those of you who aren't aware of the old Magic Invitational, what used to happen is we'd have this amazing tournament where the basic main prize would be the Magic player who won out of a number of basically the luminaries of the game would have a Magic card designed by them with their likeness on it. Chris Bakula was the meddling mage, but with the new art, you can see there that if you have any idea what Chris Bakula looks like, he doesn't look like that. I know we've got some people from Wizards watching. If you can let Jeremy Jarvis in the art department know that we would love to see any future reprints of invitational cards always be a likeness of the original, it would make me really sad to see, I don't know, Void Mage Prodigy come back and have it be a centaur without a face instead of Kai Buddha.
There's actually been 2 reprints of invitational cards, Solemn Simulacrum and Meddling Mage, both with new art.
Yeah, I don't mind new art, but just, well, we can keep the image of the invitational winner, can't we? We see a brainstorm here from Brian Eason in response to this Gem Palm Incinerator. He's looking for some plan here to help stop this really, really aggressive turn from Max.
Yeah, it's. I wonder. Did Max let Brian block?
No, that was before blocks.
Okay.
No, he made sure to get the bonus on the pile driver before cycling. Or to put that bonus on the
No, I think he actually let him block. I'm trying to work out why he let him block there.
That's an interesting question. I'm not sure. And Stoneforge Mystic, after sideboard, he has the possibility of a Sword of Feast and Famine, but I doubt that he has brought that in. Most likely it's just the Jite and the Batterskull.
Yeah. I think it's times like this he kind of wishes he had a War and Peace. Or even Fire and Ice. I think Fire and Ice would be fantastic here.
I think Fire and Ice might be the only piece of equipment that I might want. Maybe Mortar Pod. The problem with most of the equipment that might be available to Brian Eason, as in the entire history of the game of Magic, most of the equipment, is against a deck like Goblins, you just might not be able to get it onto something.
Fire and Ice would present him a great blocker, as well as the ability to pick off a lot of the goblins that Max is putting out.
If you're just joining us, I'm Adrian Sullivan here with the Ben Sec, and we are coming to you live from Atlanta. It's been a lot of Magic today, and if you're like me, it's fun to watch Magic all day. Currently, we're watching my favorite, I shouldn't say our favorite, but my favorite constructed format, Legacy.
It's funny to see all the Legacy decks are kind of like a best hits sometimes of the archetypes that have existed through the ages in all formats, in standard, in old extended, in modern, and some of them are like even hybrids. I mean, we have hybrids like Rug Delver is very much kind of like a threshold deck that's kind of on steroids.
One of the things that I think blew my mind is in Los Angeles, perhaps last year, commentating with Patrick Sullivan. He said, oh yeah, Rug Delver, the descendant or inheritor of, if you will, to Canadian Threshold. And as soon as he said it, I knew he was completely correct, but it had never occurred to me until that moment. Thanks to Patrick Sullivan, the Rainmaker, for bringing some wisdom. He's very good at wisdom bringing.
No, you definitely see a lot of kind of like descendants for Legacy decks. I mean, one of the things about the blue-white-red Miracles deck is that it is very clearly a descendant of the countertop decks that were dominating Legacy just a few months ago. Okay, Max searching his deck for a land.
Now we've got 4 mana from Max Tietze, a Cavern of Souls ensuring that counterspells are not going to stop any goblin he drops, a Rishadan Port to potentially disrupt Brian Eason's mana, and then 2 good old-fashioned mountains. Sporting different art, I believe he's got a Portal Mountain on one side and an Ice Age Mountain on the other.
Yeah, so I think he might be casting Ring Up. Oh, is he porting end of turn?
He's porting, I believe, during his own turn.
Okay.
I think it's during his own turn.
Okay.
Yeah, we're on his own turn. Before combat, in comes the Pile Driver and the Lackey. Before blockers are declared, another Incinerator. We're going to see 4 damage from the creatures on the table, and then the Lackey is going to have the ability to drop a Goblin into play if Max has one in play or in his hand.
Yeah, so he's going to...
how about this one? This is a good one.
This one...
Factor Fiction
how
Goblin.
about drawing 2 cards?
Only 2. It's just a War Chief and a Lackey.
A 3 for 1 is just not what it used to be.
Back in my day.
Okay. Just Max never seems to not have 7 cards in his hand.
Like I said, before Gristlebrand, Goblins, the numero uno card advantage deck in Legacy. Some people might claim that High Tide has that honor, but I don't know if that's the case. Brainstorm from Brian Eason.
This Legacy top 8 really showing kind of the range that Legacy has. I mean, like if you combine this top 8 plus the Invitational top 8, we really have a kind of a best hits of the format.
Absolutely.
Miracles, Omnitel, Rug, Maverick, Goblins. There's three over the there's 3 different, very different takes on Goblins over the weekend.
Absolutely, and we have 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different archetypes in this top 8.
And 7 in the Invitational top 8.
And now I have found, watching a lot of these events, the average number of archetypes in the top 8 of a Legacy event tends to be around 7. And Lingering Souls. Here we have a little speed bump. It can block a Lackey, it can block a Pile Driver, it can kill the Lackey. But that...
He's definitely in trouble here. Max has got a full grip. We know he has a War Chief in hand. We know he has another Lackey in hand. I think that it's going to be hard for him not to decide to block the Pile Driver. If he double blocks the Pile Driver, he's going to take a lot of extra damage and get a Lackey hit in. So I have a feeling we're going to see like another War Chief, and then probably yet another, maybe a. I'm trying to think what would be the best here. It's possible. I think a Lackey would be the best thing.
Well, I would be pretty scared if I were Brian Eason. If Max laid a War Chief and then dropped, say, something like a Pile Driver, you know, that would be 2 Pile Drivers out of 5 Goblins all able to attack, and that would mean each of those Pile Drivers would be serving 9 points of delicious damage.
Yeah, but one of the things that Brian actually has access to that Max doesn't realize, because he's brought it up to 3 Terminus, he's actually got a Brainstorm in hand. So he's actually able to set up a Terminus.
Well, that's not bad here.
He might have already set up that Terminus.
We see Lackey. This one, we got all of these Goblins coming in. It's going to be 9 from the Pile Driver, 2 each from the War Chief and the Ringleader, 1 each from the Lackeys, for a total of 15 possible damage. Now,
he's definitely blocking that one because it's a ton of damage, and I think he's just going to block a Lackey, which kind of indicates that he didn't actually set up his deck such that he's going to see a Terminus this turn.
Now, one of the things about Goblins, if you have not played against Goblins, what it can do can be shocking. You know, especially the newfangled goblins that we've been seeing for a while now. They are not this old school version like we saw something like Owen Turtenwald played at Columbus. The new ones, they aren't built to be like this. They're built to kind of fight in a very different fight.
Yeah, they're very much a card advantage attrition. Like, they can kill out of nowhere, but they also really, really rely on like their card drawing engines to just keep up the pressure every turn.
I mean, what do you have? You have a fact or fiction-like card in Ringleader. You have a demonic tutor in Matron. You have a dark ritual in your Skirk Prospector / War Chief. I mean, this in some ways this feels a little bit like you're talking about a combo deck. Some people like to call goblins aggro combo, and I understand exactly why they want to say that. It makes sense from a certain standpoint. I might disagree a little bit, but that's quibbling, really. And we see right now, Brian Eason, he needs a Terminus right quick.
Right. Yep.
There it is.
There it is. He did set it up. And he kind of like, I think he tried to block one of the lackeys to really kind of fake that the Terminus was there, because if he let both lackeys through, it was kind of a clear indication that something was up.
Now, one thing to think about. The Goblin Ringleader in Max Tietze's hand, it's uncounterable because of Cavern of Souls. Even if Brian answers it, he still needs to do something big in order to get in this game. This is the problem that players back in the day had with goblins. Beating goblins was hard. You would stop the early rush, maybe be at a low life, and it just seemed like the goblins deck would never run out of gas.
Okay, so let's see what the next phase of Brian's plan is going to be. He does have Lingering Souls in his graveyard, so he does have some offense he can mount. And we do know that he has a Batterskull in his hand. Though I think there's a Tinscreet Hooligan in Max's hand, but I might have misseen that. Oh no,
4-mana Jace.
That's a Jace.
Jace, a card that. I mean, he can find 3 cards with it, but it's not very exciting.
They're not very exciting. There's
not very exciting. Landing a Jace against an empty board. How crazy is that to say?
Well, the 3 cards he drew with the Brainstorm ability was Counterspell, Jace, and a land. Not
Counterspell. Yeah, I don't like seeing that in the deck still after sideboard.
Yeah, I mean, he really is kind of in trouble about like the cards he can take out. Counterspell. Just not quite good enough, especially in the face of this Cavern of Souls.
Yeah, one of the things, Counterspell fighting against Cavern of Souls and Aether Vial. I remember taking out Counterspell when there was just Aether Vial.
Yeah, I mean, it just might be that he has not enough cards to bring in, but I mean, he probably brought in the Vindicate. I hope he brought in the Vindicate. I think that card's probably a little bit better than Counterspell.
And we see a Cavern.
Well, there's only one 4-mana spell in his deck, and it's
Boom.
a good one.
Let's see how many he gets this time. Pile Driver, only Pile Driver. This was a very, very sad Ringleader. It's only a
Silvergill
hasty Silvergill Adept that finds a card that's incredible.
Okay, so I think he's just going to hit him in the face here. I'm
not sure. He might hit the Jace here just to make it so that Jace can't bounce. Not that Jace wants to bounce a Ringleader. Let me take that back. The face might be okay.
I think the face, he just wants to, 3 damage, I think.
Oh boy,
wow.
Another Cavern.
That Counterspell is getting worse and worse in that hand.
You know, midway through this weekend, I talked about how I needed to update my control deck and get the Wastelands out of it. Maybe I was being premature.
I think getting the Counterspells out of most decks, I mean, it's funny. It's like, Counterspell used to be the premium counter magic in like the format. Basically, most decks, if they're running Counterspell, run 1. Yeah. I wonder. Actually, I said I wanted Black Vice unbanned. I wonder what a world would be like with mana drain.
Oh, don't talk about mana drain. I mean, Legacy is an expensive format. We're going to have to bring our volume down a little bit. Without the workers in this hall breaking down the entire room, apparently our voices are carrying all the way over to that match.
Yeah, but mana drain seems to be it'll be a really exciting card to see. I mean, like I've never really seen it in a extremely competitive format. I mean, it was basically banned before a lot of the tournaments could play it. Obviously, it gets played in Vintage, but apart from that, we haven't really seen Mana Drain in any of the competitive extended or legacy tournaments.
Do you hear that, Wizards of the Coast people? This is definitive proof that the Bensec is crazy. So
No,
unban Mana Drain.
I'm not saying that it wouldn't be really good and pushing the boundaries, but I like to push the boundaries in these kind of formats. And you know, you have a look at the format. It's turned into a lot of cheap counterspells. The only counterspells that get played are Daze, Spell Pierce, and Force of Will, and counterspells relegated to a one of, which tends to mean that it's possible that blue is just a little bit too much to ask for.
We see Brian Eason here go Snapcaster, and he's going to hit the hand of Max Tietze. Sharpshooter, Tin Street Hooligan. Oh my God, that's a really good hand. Look at that.
Yeah, it's the fact that there's yet another ringleader in his hand. I mean, Brian's going to just have to like.
Was that a Thoughtseize or an Inquisition that's being used? I think it's an Inquisition.
Yeah. He hasn't cast a Thoughtseize this game yet. Oh, yep, that's right, an Inquisition.
Wow.
Tin Street Hooligan.
Tin Street Hooligan.
We may be going back to Tin Street. Tin Street
I don't know. I've always been more of a Gun Street person. So.
We'll see what Gatecrash has in store for the Gruul.
I have to say, I know I'm looking forward to Return to Ravnica shaking things up. I think it's going to shake up everything. I think it's going to shake up Legacy.
Yeah. No, I mean, we were talking about like a lot of cards. Abrupt Decay is like, I mean, it's a really big deal. Like being able to kill Counterbalance without having to worry about getting counted.
And here we go, Linger, Linger, Linger. And finally, is this going to be a top?
It is a top.
Brian Eason, 2 life, trying to mount a comeback here.
Yeah, it's going to be real troublesome if he draws a War Chief here.
Is that another cavern?
It's another cavern.
Oh my God!
I think
Max.
you can have too many caverns though.
I don't know.
We're just heading to almost the 1 hour mark in this match, the final match of the whole weekend. 53 rounds of Magic played. 3 champions are going to be crowned. 3 major champions and then 3 other.
That's right.
Which has been actually at the beginning of the weekend. I was going to think that I was going to be exhausted. I am very tired at the end, but it's been fantastic.
I've been having an amazing weekend here of Magic and just great people on top of that.
Yeah.
If you're just joining us, I'm Adrian Sullivan here with the Bensec. Max Tietze is on the left playing Goblins, Brian Eason on the right playing Stoneblade. And we get one more Incinerator off of this ringleader.
The Incinerator is actually super good right now. I mean, it's always good, to be real. I think he can actually cast it too. He has to play a land, which he has, because we said he drew a Cavernous Soul, so he can actually cycle the Gem Palm Incinerator. I wonder if he's just gonna. I guess he should just cycle it. Force the double block. If he kills the Snapcaster Mage, he can basically force his opponent to block once each with the tokens.
Looking over the Twitter feed from this event, I can see that the one and only Lan D Ho informing Chris Bakula of his demise earlier in this match. Max Tietze lays another land. Two ringleaders face off against a Snapcaster Mage and 2 spirits. Brian Eason at a precarious 2 life.
Yeah, he's going to cycle. He's going to cycle the incinerator, or he's going to play his. Maybe setting up for next turn. He's going to play the pile driver. So he plays the pile driver, which tends to indicate a pass this turn.
Next turn, he's threatening quite a bit of damage here. Unfortunately for him, there are several speed bumps on the way, a Jace the Mind Sculptor, and a Sensei's Divining Top to provide miraculous shenanigans. I'm Adrian Sullivan in the booth with Ben Seck, waiting to see what Brian Eason is going to do with this turn to make something valuable happen.
You really kind of need yet another Terminus, and that doesn't really get him out of the problem. Still a lot of cards in Max's hand, including a Sharpshooter and a Incinerator. If he actually gets a War Chief, the Sharpshooter is going to be lethal basically immediately. Okay, so Brian Eason plays a land. See if he's 5 mana. We're going to play the Battle Skull. Can be very problematic for. Let's see. I think he drew another pile driver, as far as I could tell.
Now we're trying to be quiet here. Once again, there's just too few people in this hall, and our voices carry all the way clear of the match, even though it's a good ways away.
So I'm actually craning my head again, trying to see his hand.
Now, Evan Irwin did tell me he is working on 3-dimensional broadcasting so that we can be able to do what you're trying to do, but unfortunately he's not there yet, so right now, craning your neck won't help give you a better vantage point on these cards. I keep telling him I wanted an Android, but...
Then I could commentate every weekend from the luxury of my own home. Okay, so...
Play number 1.
I think he's going to cast the Sharpshooter. Sharpshooter is a card you don't really see in Goblin decks very much anymore. It used to be one of the most important cards, especially in all the tribal mirrors.
If you look at the Goblin Sharpshooter, it's one of my favorite goblins because it has a little gun.
Yeah, a wooden Gatling gun.
Yeah. There are quite a few goblins with guns if you look at Portal. Some of my favorite art. Unfortunately, they're not very good goblins, but it's really cool to see goblins with guns.
Portal 2 actually had guns.
Sharpshooter's in play.
Okay. Now, if he untaps, it's going to mean the end of all the 1 toughness creatures on Brian's side.
How many are there? All of them are dead.
There's 3.
Yep. One of the things I was talking about this weekend is the way that triggers have changed. We're going to see a trigger change again in organized play very soon.
Yeah, okay, so Max is going to cycle the Gem Palm Incinerator. Hopefully there's no Swords to Plowshares, because if there's Swords to Plowshares, it's going to be a little bit of sadness on Max's side.
He's going to go for that germ, I think.
Yeah, he's going for the germ. He has exactly the right amount. So if there's a time for Brian to actually have it, he's checking for swords. There are no swords in the graveyard.
It's a scary moment for Max.
He does have 2 Gem Palms. And there is a Swords to Plowshares.
It's unfortunate.
Yeah, I'm tending to think that he probably should have just played Gem Palm Incinerator twice. Not risked him. Now he's kind of like left himself a little open.
And it's a pass.
Yeah, that was probably.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. What he did there was he said, "Do you have it?" You know, and if he doesn't have it, that's going to be really bad news. It just so happened that Brian Eason did.
Wow, that could be a turning point, though. I'm not willing to call it with Brian at 2 life, but it's certainly.
Oh, it's certainly a moment where the game is shifting to a new stage.
So Brian attacks with his germ for 4, getting him away from the brink there. He now is at 6 life.
It looks like that's a Korean black-bordered swords to plowshares that Brian Eason's using.
Classy.
Yeah, Korean's my favorite printed language in Magic, so kudos to Brian Eason, the underdog in this matchup versus Max Tietze. Brian Eason, the 8th seed coming into this event, or into this top 8, and Max Tietze, the number 2 seed, behind only Trevor Petrelli with Omnitel.
I think Magic has been translated into, 13 languages.
Only?
Not only, 13 languages, which is like an incredible number for any game. 13 covers most of the major languages in the world. So Max drew a port.
I think I got up to 11 languages and then ran out of ideas.
Russian.
I got the Russian.
There's 2 Chinese.
Oh, the 2 Chinese, that's 12. Okay, Goblin Matron tutoring up what is left in Max's library. That's a pretty good one. Unfortunately for Max, the Batterskull could get in another hit.
Yeah, but once he has it out, he's actually... he can basically start ending the game. There is another Swords to Plowshares in Brian's hand, so he's not actually going to be able to. This is going to be much tougher.
Land again for Max. Amusingly, if you look at Max's board, he's got all these creatures out, and not a single one of them can Jace do anything very profitably with. Jace is going to be stuck casting Brainstorms, the poor guy.
Yeah, I mean, tough life. Portuguese? You have Portuguese there?
I had Portuguese. I even had the promo Hebrew one.
I wasn't counting that one.
Okay, we've got a port activation happening, taking out a black source.
Did you count American and English as 2 different ones?
I did see the word maths on a new card.
Maths?
Maths, the English version of math.
Yeah, yep, I did grow up going to maths class.
Yeah, not me. Math class. For those of you who are just joining us, I'm Adrian Sullivan. This is Ben Suck, and we have been briefly talking about language here while we wait to see what happens during this upkeep. One of the things that happens a lot in Magic is these moments of just kind of time while we wait to see what happens next. We've got a lot of creatures on the board, 2 ringleaders, a Goblin Matron, a Goblin Pile Driver facing off against Brian Eason, who has 2 Lingering Souls, 1 Snapcaster Mage, a Batterskull with a Germ, a looks like Jace with 3 counters and a Sensei's Divining Top. Look at this, Brian Eason, Wasteland, bringing a Wasteland to the table to get rid of maybe one of those Rishadan ports. I'm not 100% sure. Yep, it's a Rishadan port going away. And then we get Jace the Mind Sculptor, Sensei's Divining Top, looking at a little bit of mana at the end of the turn. Back to Max Tietze. Max here. Gosh. Look at that face. Brian Eason on the right. He's just trying to make sure nothing bad happens. He looks nervous.
Yeah. He does have a Swords to Plowshares in hand as for a little bit of defense. I think he drew another matron too, so.
Okay, I can see quite a few good cards in Max Tietze's hand. I'm a little worried about naming them out loud, lest the players in the other area hear me. And we see once again Cavern of Souls being tapped. Uncounterable Goblin number 30 million. Which one will it be? Matron. Oh, there's the war chiefs and ringleaders and siege gang commander.
Yeah, he's just laying siege to Brian Eason's board here.
Now, Brian Eason not so long ago was at 2 life, now up to 10. One thing to remember though, why I at least claim that Goblins is not a pure aggro deck, it's partly because it's not trying desperately to race you down to 0. It's more like, I'm just going to put out a bunch of stuff and it happens to be good enough to kill you, that's fine. It can do swaths of damage in groups of 18, 20, 30, 40. Brian Eason's going to need to gain a lot of life to be out of the danger zone.
Funnily enough, Max really wants more land. Like, in the absence of having a vial, he's not going to be able to sack enough creatures.
And we see a draw, then a brainstorm from Jace. Once again, Brian every turn making his hand sculpted into something more and more powerful.
Yeah.
Max, though, is not out of this game. Not by a long shot. Yeah. Wasteland. This is the second Wasteland in a row from Brian Eason. And what Brian's doing here is he's trying to keep Max contained. He knows that if Max has access to all the mana he wants, he's just going to be able to push so much onto the table it might be too much to handle. He knows, based on the matron, that there's a siege gang in hand. And that's not something he wants to see hit the table. At least not with open mana. Another chump from a Goblin Matron. Brian Eason goes up to 14. Max Tietze now down to 4 creatures in play. And this is Adrian Sullivan in the booth with Ben Seck. We're bringing you the final match here of the weekend.
Yeah, no, it's headed to about 12:30 at night in Atlanta. We're at basically just over 70 minutes.
Okay. In comes the... I should say out goes the germ, I think.
I'm trying to...
We've got Brian Eason here trying to pull back from the edge of death.
Yeah, no, he's now ahead of Max now. Max really has to is hurting on the mana because of the 2 wastelands. He used to have 7 land, now he has 5 land.
Max with only look at this. He's cycling on one of those spirits instead of the germ. He wants to take something out that he knows he can actually definitely get.
He got a little gun shy after that Swords to Plowshares a few turns ago.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Siege Gang Commander. Does that work? Yeah. Will a Swords to Plowshares
Gang's all here.
Get rid of him?
I'm pretty sure there'll be a sword sometime.
Let's look at the top 3. Has Brian Eason set up a Terminus to clear all of this mess out of the way?
Well, if that happened, he would still have access to his Batter Skull.
Is a miracle still a miracle if you set it up? Or is that some sort of flim-flam?
It's magic at that point.
Now look at this. An incredible board assembled by Max Tietze.
Yeah, just clawing his way back. Really almost unassailable position. I think if he had just Max had a little bit more, in hindsight at least, a little more patience, he probably could have just killed him outright with a
The Skirk Prospector?
yeah, with the Skirk Prospector at that stage, and maybe even later than that with the Sharpshooter if he just waited for a haste.
Okay, look at this. Brian Eason takes to the air.
I think that was his plan. I think that's why Max maybe started killing the flyers.
And then Swords to Plowshares gives 2 life back to Max after 5 damage in the air. Hits him from a spirit that has picked up the Batter Skull.
Yeah, I don't think Max wants that life. He'd rather have the Siege Gang Commander. Ryan really taking control of this game now, up to 19 life.
You know, that's what happens when you end up with a Jace being unbothered. That Jace has been doing a lot of work this game, and it's been activated 4 times now, just sculpting really, really great draws for the rest of this game. If you're just joining us, this is the final match of the weekend for this incredible 53 match weekend of Magic the Gathering here at the Star City Games Invitational Weekend.
Yeah, and this last game of the weekend, last match of the weekend, is like really turning out to be a really tough one.
Wow, another Siege Gang commander.
Another Swords to Plowshares. Really doesn't. I think Max is in terrible trouble now. He's running out of normal Goblin tokens. Had to go to the Star City Games Goblin tokens.
That is trouble. Now you can see on Brian Eason's wrist a little wristband. That's actually a part of the security that Star City Games has implemented here, so that events are not going to have people running away with your bag. I'm really happy that we're doing that now.
Yeah.
Look at
2
that.
pile drivers, not really.
Not great.
Not great. I think Tietze.
Oh, Tietze. This is the beginning of the impossible to escape land. I think we've gotten into that vortex.
Yeah.
There was still a chance to escape, but I think it might have just been closed.
Yeah,
perhaps.
I think it's probably closed. He actually wins next turn too. He has the Vindicate. Basically, he just pump his guy next turn. That's pretty much I think Incinerator is the only thing that kills it, and I think he's used them all.
Max Tietze looking for a path to victory here. And he packs it up.
Oh wow, that was an impressive, comeback.
In the background of this match, you can see the inimitable Ruben Bressler of Magic the Newsening and much else. Now, it's been an interesting weekend overall. We actually just saw a almost zombified-looking Callie Anderson run by. It's Callie Anderson. It's her anniversary weekend, and her husband Todd Anderson came through with a victory in the Invitational. So
I'm sure they're going to have a happy week celebrating that victory. I think Brian's gone to the restroom.
Yeah, well, I mean, this has been about 80 minutes of Magic, and Brian was certainly playing a lot of Magic before this. Giving him a short break there, that's fine. I think I see Gerard Fabiano in the background there with Reed Duke, and is that Matt Costa maybe? I'm not 100% sure. It's a little bit too far in the background. Great players all around.
Yeah, no, this is So Max is going to be on the play for the final game.
This is a huge boon to Max.
Yeah.
We've talked about whether being on the play or on the draw, how important it is in Magic throughout Magic's history. And in Legacy, there are a lot of matchups where it's particularly important. It was actually very shocking at last year, one of the Los Angeles Star City Games Opens. There was a Dredge player there who literally, I think, kind of made people's heads explode all week. Well, not literally, pardon me. Figuratively made people's heads explode all weekend by going on the draw as a means to do the 8-card discard outlets with his Dredge deck.
Well, he actually had 0 land in his deck, not a single one.
Yeah. No land is a very aggressive.
He may have had Dakmor salvage.
I think he might have had some land, like a salvage, perhaps. Yeah.
But actually, his deck was actually intended to never play a land. Basically, he could dredge it sometimes if it was necessary with a Dakmor salvage. But in general, he was not trying to do that. He was trying to play no land.
You know, Legacy is a crazy format. You got no land decks, you got 1 land decks, you got 43 land decks. I mean, this is what makes Legacy so... I mean, I'm getting a little bit giddy. Not as giddy as me and Patrick Chapin were in Detroit, but, I mean, we had to tell ghost stories at one point because the power seemed to go out in the midst of the finals, but...
What's the most land you've played in the deck?
The most land that I have played in a deck, maybe 31.
31?
Yeah.
Was that in maybe a draw go deck or something?
It was a draw go variant. Yeah, I was already qualified for the Pro Tour, and I had started playing Shane Neville, a old school Canadian Magic player. I started playing his black-blue control deck in, gosh, whatever that format was, Tempest Block Constructed.
Yeah, so I think I've played a 29 land deck, and for like normal decks that don't try and like abuse the land in some way, either having no land or 43 land, around 29, 30 land, it's 50, basically 50% of your deck actually dedicated to land. That's because back in the old days, I guess, when the control decks were really like prevalent, the most important thing you needed to do every turn was draw and play a land.
Every turn if you could.
Yeah, absolutely. It actually got to the point where you were like doing nothing but playing land every turn, and the first person who blinked was the first person who lost.
Often it was the first person who acted. And if you didn't lay a land, you might be the first one to have to discard.
That's right.
In this matchup, we actually see something quite different than that. Max Tietze, he has a lot of land for many of the decks that attack in this format. That's partly because he doesn't have Brainstorm. And so, as a result of that, he plays 23 land. Another reason, he's also running Rishadan ports, and that takes an investment of mana in order to get the work done.
Yeah, the reason why Goblins can run so many lands is that it runs 8 utility lands, 4 wastelands, 4 Rishadan port. Basically doesn't need to use its normal land to cast things because it normally has Aether Vial or Goblin Lackey.
If you want to count Aether Vial as a pseudo land, you're talking 27 mana sources. If you want to keep pushing this thought and count Lackey as quote-unquote land, you're talking 31, Skirk Prospector 32, Goblin Warchief 36. Man, Max Tietze has more land in his Goblin deck than I ran in my Draw-Go deck.
I mean, I'd like to call Lackey and Aether Vial, they're more like Soul Rings than land.
Oh, that's fair. That actually is a really good comparison. That means that Max Tietze is running 8 Soul Rings in his deck. Somebody alert the DCI, let him know. If you're just joining us, I'm Adrian Sullivan here in the booth with Ben Sack. Shortly, once this match gets underway, we're going to have to bring the volume back down a little bit. There's just too few people in this venue for the players to not hear us when we talk.
And everyone's really interested in the match, so like the tension, there's a really hushed silence over the tournament.
This is the final game of the weekend. Well, unless somehow a mutual death happens.
Part of our coverage team has warned us that we shouldn't even risk that, so we're going to touch some wood here.
You know, it's kind of crazy. There's not anything in these 150 cards that'll cause a mutual death, but what if it happens? Now here we see the opening that Max Tietze wants, a turn 1 Lackey.
And is there a source to plowshares?
Well,
There is, I
Oh,
think.
careful. We got to start speaking pretty quiet to make sure we don't give anything away. I think the rule of thumb I'm going to run with right now, seeing as there's so few noises stopping our voices, well, I'm going to do just in play. And just, I'm not even going to talk about what we should know and remember, just in case they don't know and remember.
Okay, so we attacks with the lackey. Let's see if Brian Eason. I believe Brian Eason has let it in, hit it, so Max Tietze is trying to choose which creature. He's looks like he's choosing. He's trying to work out. Oh, he's choosing Pile Driver. And it looks like he's laying a Rishon import. I think he's trying to win this game a little faster.
Well, I mean, he always wants to win it faster.
That's true.
Sometimes he just doesn't have that luxury, and Goblins is a deck that can afford actually to play to a long game because of those card advantage engines.
Yeah, so I think he's going for the quicker kill rather than. Okay, so I think he's just going to attack with this lackey and this Goblin Pile Driver.
All right, here we've got 4 damage, 3 from the Pile Driver and 1 from the lackey, should these guys manage to hit.
Okay, so the lackey hits. We're going to see another goblin coming from Max Tietze's hand.
I believe he's well, I don't want to say what's in his hand. I'm going to just be careful. I'm going to exercise some caution.
Okay. That attack actually brought Brian Eason down to 15. Getting a ringleader, which will gas up his hand the next turn.
Right now, Brian Eason probably hoping to sweep the table away. A ringleader is a great card, but it's not great if you can't cast it. Oh my goodness gracious!
That's a really crippling thing. It's like wastelanding the tundra there. Now Max won't actually be able to suppress the mana of the Flooded Strand because he can always just sack it.
Right now, a grand total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 damage awaits Brian Eason on the table if nothing else happens.
7 damage would bring him down to 8. Brian Eason really looks like he has a bit of a clunky hand. Did not have a Swords to Plowshares for his for the first turn lackey. I presume so anyway, because I would kill that thing as soon as I had the opportunity to. Brian Eason is going to play a Thoughtseize, basically to take out the ringleader he knows is in his hand. It's a little bit of a dangerous play, considering that it will cost him 2 life, bringing down to 13. This next attack is going to attack for 7, bringing him down to 6, presuming the sack land, if he uses it, I was just going to tap it. So now Brian Eason is going to be just at 6 life. Okay. Lackey triggers. Brian Eason's at 6 life. Plays another matron. Probably getting a brother ringleader. First one didn't quite do the job.
right now, this has upped the damage without any resistance to 9.
Yeah, so on board, Brian is dead. He doesn't really have anything.
This is his chance right here.
Right.
Max Tietze taps down the land that he can easily tap.
Yeah.
Brian Eason, does he have a brainstorm here?
So.
Oh, this is interesting because the brainstorm, unless there's a terminus right there, he's going to need to have another brainstorm and a blue mana source to be able to do a during Max Tietze's turn terminus.
No, I think he's brainstorming upkeep.
Yeah, I understand, but he's already drawn a card now.
Oh yeah, you're right.
He's going to have a land, another brainstorm to be able to have the terminus he's putting back be able to be done on Max Tietze's turn. Now, this is problematic in another way because it has to be a land that he does not sacrifice in order to get mana from it.
That's right. So he really does not have that many options here. I think Brian's realizing that he pretty much...
Yeah, Miracle does not trigger from your draw phase draw. It triggers from your first draw of any kind.
Yeah, so the brainstorm has already turned off the miracle.
You're not supposed to think about miracles. They're just supposed to happen.
If you believe in them.
Yes, exactly.
Anything's possible. So
if you're like me and you're looking at this board, I mean, it's really cool to see Magic kind of going back in time. This is one of the reasons I think history in the game is important. Knowing what happened 4 or 5 years ago, it can help you understand what's happening today.
Absolutely. I think something I like doing occasionally is going back into the archives of a lot of the Magic sites, including StarCityGames.com, and like looking at the old articles and what kind of decks they were talking about like a couple years ago, because it really sometimes gives you some insight of like, oh, that's a way I haven't thought about, like attacking a format for a long time.
Absolutely. We see Brian Eason after the brainstorm shuffles everything away, getting a Tundra. If you're just joining us, I'm Adrian Sullivan here with Ben Seck, and we have viewers from all over the globe. We've had players from all over the globe. There were at least 2 players here from Italy, a player here from Russia that flew here for this event, thanks in part to the IQ program that we do, the Invitational Qualifier program for these events.
Okay, an Inquisition of Kozilek from Brian. Probably taking...
There's Goodbye Incinerator. And now for Brian to survive this turn, he's going to need to have a Swords to Plowshares for the ringleader, or sorry, for the pile driver.
So Max is considering his options here. If Brian has a pile driver, a Swords to Plowshares, and he's tapping his white. Oh yes, he did draw it. So he puts him down to 2, the same life that he actually came back from last round. So if he's to win, he's going to have to come back from the same place he came back from last game. He grabs a War Chief and a Goblin Matron. My guess is the only thing that's going to save him here is a Terminus right now. He has essentially a 1-turn window. Okay, here's the 1-turn window. Really needs to have Terminus. Oh, we can't actually have Terminus anyway. Okay, Max Tietze.
There we go.
Is your Legacy Open champion, piloting goblins.
Okay, wow. And you can hear the cheers of the